Welcome to this session with Baltasar Kormákur, and he's here straight from Nepal, more or less. Well, where you're working on a project, and he's here to receive the first Nordic Honorary Dragon Award, which will be presented tonight at the closing event. So we're really happy that you took time out and to come and share a bit of your experience as a filmmaker. And we were just talking outside, and I asked, how many films? Well, he doesn't really know, and neither do I, but there's quite a lot. Let's say a dozen films or so. So I was thinking for this conversation there could be this alternative headline for it, which runs more or less like from local hero to Hollywood fame. That's the story of your professional life. So before we dig into specifics, could you just tell us a little bit about that leap across the ocean? How did you become bought with American producers and studios?
Well, when I was starting out, there was not even an idea of that in Iceland. Nobody had done that, not a director or an actor had even done that crossing, so it wasn't anything that I was pursuing or dreaming of or thinking of that much. And when I was, starting, I started as an actor, and both a director in theater and actor in theater, and then eventually I started directing my own films. And I wasn't even, at that point, even thinking about Hollywood in any sense. And there was the idea of going to Hollywood to make it, and then everyone failed and came back. And that was the story of Scandinavia a lot. And also the story of everyone in Iceland had tried, not everyone in Iceland, but everyone who from Iceland kind of had tried that, came with the tail back, and the head down. And so it wasn't something that was appealed to me. But things have changed, and the technical things have changed, and I didn't want to become a cocaine addict by a pool in LA. So I basically live in the north of Iceland with my horses, my 5 children, and my wife. And I can work from there most of the time. So it's not like I've never ever left my country to do this. It's just my work has just reached. I was lucky from the beginning that 101 Reykjavik traveled a lot. So I got offers, and now I actually can make films that have opportunities of traveling around the world more than I did before. And also I have managed to get paid, so I can actually do more Icelandic stuff, which I'm producing and directing and doing more. So it's kind of actually it's all been kind of to enlarge the company in Iceland and make it stronger, and the film industry. And my next project after Everest is hopefully a Viking film, and that will be shot in Iceland, and the whole Icelandic industry is going to benefit from that.
So we'll definitely talk more about those upcoming projects. But I mean, in all senses, the film 101 Reykjavik, which also screens here in the festival, in the retrospective, that was, a starting point for a lot of things. And I think while we're at it, we could just show a clip from that film, in which you also acted. So let's have a look at that. 101 Reykjavik.
He's crazy.
Yeah, welcome to Siberia. A piece of Reykjavik slacker life, and there was, of course, as you saw, Baltasar in one of the roles and Victoria Abril, and another character in that film is the bar where it all takes place in Kaffibarinn.
Yeah, it's actually, I haven't seen it in a long time, and it actually looks way better than this. This is a very bad protection.
But at the time you owned this bar, you still own it?
Yes. No, I stopped drinking 11 years ago,
Okay.
and I sold the bar eventually because I didn't want to become like many of my colleagues, who kind of kill their careers of being drunk in festivals. And so but funny, I remember someone told me a long time ago, work from a place you know. And when I made this film, it couldn't have been any closer to home. I am half Spanish, and therefore Victoria Abril has been a favorite actress of mine in a long time.
Acting in many of Almodovar's
Yeah, I've
films.
done a lot of Almodovar films, and I stalked her all the way to Paris to get her into the film. She said, I'm not going to shoot a film in minus 15 degrees of Celsius with a first-time director. And I didn't stop until I managed to convince her. And the bar that is in the movie, it was owned by me, but also that was the place I used to get drunk in for most of my youth. And where Lena lives was opposite my house, so it was as close, and I lived in this area for all the time, and it was as close. As I said, it was kind of biographical film, apart from my mother is not a lesbian, and I didn't have sex with my father, or stepfather, which he doesn't have. So it was very close, and I think partly it was also this film was a little bit different from what Icelandic films had been doing, because we never presented foreigners in Iceland in our films, really, that it was a country that you had foreigners, and it was more open, we were kind of more telling stories about the countryside and like very Icelandic, because partly that's what we thought, at least, that foreign audiences wanted to see from us, something about elves. And I was I'd been playing in a lot of movies, and I was kind of, wanted to show the Reykjavik that I was, a part of.
And so you did. And going back in time, now that we're doing that, remember in 1993, when I was in Reykjavik, I saw this production of Hair, the musical, which you had directed then with a lot of energy, as I recall it. And then some few years later, you were, the whiz kid of the blossoming Icelandic film life, and on the verge of the sort of international breakthrough that you made with this particular film. And at that time, Fredrik Fredriksson, he a regular at this festival, he was the guy who had made it and who made efforts for the local industry, and who was producing a lot of young filmmakers. And now I'm finally getting to the question. And now you have sort of taken that role, right? I mean, you're paving the way for the young talents in Iceland as a producer, and
yeah, I mean, I think in people from small nations, there's a lot of pride, national pride, in the sense that, and not a burden, but a kind of sense of duty that if you do and you go abroad and if you do well, then you have to make it for the good of the society. And I think it is, and it's not only in the film industry, I think it's generally in a lot of people. And there's a strong sense, for example, even the people who leave and don't do that, they come back home to die, It's like you're born in a little island, you can go, but it never leaves you. And I think it's not because I feel that I want to glorify the fact, but I do think the purpose that I find is to do that. It gives me a purpose of more in what I'm doing, is to bring it back home and try to build up a stronger film society. And I enjoy doing that a lot. I mean, it's what I mean, it's not really a hard job. You asked me, am I killing myself of work? Yes, it's a lot of work. But at the same time, if you enjoy something thoroughly, I'm doing Dagur Kári's film now as a producer, and I love he's a
Dagur Kári, who directed Nói Albi Nói, who was here at the festival some years ago.
I think he won the festival here some years ago, and I'm producing his new movie, and I just love watching his cuts. I might as well do that as watch TV, So, or even better. So it's not like it's a passion that I enjoy doing.
And you were really born and bred in the theater. I mean, you made your debut in the theater as Romeo, of course. And then you went on to direct some 10 plays or so, and then you even owned, I remember, a theater of your own, Loftkastalinn.
Yeah, I felt when I came in, and we didn't have an Ingmar Bergman in Iceland. We didn't have this connection between films and theater, There was actually a very separated feeling. The film industry said actors can't, Icelandic actors can't play in movies. They only can play on stage, and there was a separation. And I was very lucky. I got a lot of work on both places, so I kind of felt like a little bit as an ambassador of trying to, matchmaker, to get those two things to come together. And I think it's changed immensely. Not only because of me, I'm just in general. Now like Benedict, who showed his film on the festival,
of Horses and Men.
Horses and Men comes out of the theater. It's much more open now, and I think because they have more in common than not. So I felt that. But yes, I did. I did create a theater called Castle in the Sky, or Castle in the Air would maybe be a better.
Luftslottet.
Yeah, Luftslottet, which was a factory that we bought, and we changed it into a 400-seat theater, which was the first commercial theater in Iceland. Unfortunately, I couldn't direct a lot of my own stuff there because I had more ambitions than making, like T42 or stuff like that. So we did some ambitious work, but I mostly directed the National Theatre because I went from just a musical head, but I did Hamlet, I did a lot of Shakespeare for the National Theatre, and maybe that's a part of why my filmography is kind of wider than you might see from many people. I go from doing a comedy to a drama, and to action. I don't necessarily feel the need to put myself in a shelf. The others can do that.
But can you tell us a little bit more about the transition from the theater to making films? How did it come about?
Well, I played in a couple of Thor Fredriksson films. I did the lead in Devil's Island, and I was in Angels of the Universe as well. And I was very into it. While most actors would be eating biscuits and drinking coffee, I was just asking about lenses and trying to understand how people break down films, and in the end becoming a pain in the ass because I had too much opinions, so it felt like, it was about time that I would just do it myself.
So it was really learning by watching and then learning by doing.
Yeah, learning by watching, and also being an actor, you start to understand a lot. You learn from your colleagues and the people you're working from, and then yes, by doing it. I think, in the end of the day, that's the only way you can learn to make films, is just to make them. There is you can be educated through school by understanding or learning what others have done, but it doesn't teach you how to make a film. And I think the true learning process is in making them.
And then by way of directing actors, I guess that's a definite advantage, being an actor yourself.
Yeah, I think I'll put it this way, that being a director with the experience of an actor is definitely helpful. You will understand a little bit simple crises that actors go through. On the other hand, being an actor doesn't make you a director. So it's only if you are a director. And I define myself as a director. I don't define myself as an actor anymore. That happened when I made this film. I realized that I was a director. I wasn't an actor. By heart, I can act and I enjoy doing it, but that's not where my passion was lying. And I get more out of seeing other people succeed on screen than me. I don't like myself in that film at all. It's one of my worst performances. It's painful to watch.
Well, you're not exactly Mr. Nice Guy there.
No, but I'm prouder of some other stuff I've done with other directors because I think they're better suited to direct me than myself. And I've never ever played in my own film since then.
So Reykjavik, Rotterdam was your last acting, the last time you acted?
Yeah, I did that film, and I was also interesting because I hadn't been playing for a while, and Oscar Jónasson came to me. He's one of our better known directors in Iceland. Came to me, and I thought he was asking me to produce his film, and he wanted me to read the script. He didn't tell me why. I just, because a lot of filmmakers asked me for that support, and then I read the script and I really liked it. That was a fun caper, and then he came. No, actually, I want you to play the lead. I was like, what? Those days are gone. But then we kind of agreed that I would play in it if I produce it as well.
And now, as it happens, you are producing it, but as a remake, right?
No, I already did it.
Oh, you already did it. Sorry.
I
Yeah,
directed the remake of it called Contraband in America.
Yeah, right. Okay.
With Mark Wahlberg playing my role.
That's a Contraband story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I read in an interview in New York Times that where you were interviewed, you said you resist the concept that a foreign director has to surrender to achieve success in Hollywood. So my question is...
So again?
No, that you resist the concept of a foreign director having to surrender, to Hollywood standards, so to speak, to achieve success in that same Hollywood. So my simple question is, how do you do that? I mean, how do you...
Well, I think
resist?
My journey is, my journey has been, yes, I did make films that had a potential of having success, box office wise, and by getting into that position, I'm making a film now that working title has been trying to make for 10 years or more. Stephen Daldry tried to make it, and I think David Fincher as well, and it was never made. I'm not comparing myself to this man, but I'm just that kind of ambitious project I'm doing now that would never have been able to go from Iceland to do that. It's called Everest. That's why I came from Nepal. I'm shooting that with Josh Brolin, Jake Gyllenhaal, Josh Brolin, yeah, and Emily Watson, Jason Clarke, fantastic ensemble cast. To get you kind of, you might have to get yourself in a position to do that. And now the next project will be a Viking film that's shot in Iceland, as I told you before, and that to get, and I started that project in early 2000. I got the biggest fund from the Icelandic film, the film fund. And I realized the Vikings have never been shown in the scale that they were because of budget restrictions. And I understand that very well. I'm not criticizing people, but it's just impossible to create the world. And I wanted to create the world. So I thought, I'm going to give the grant back, and maybe in 10 years' time, I will have enough resources to create that world. Mm. And I don't know, hopefully, I will learn in the next half a year if that's the case now. Mm. So what I'm saying is that you don't have to surrender to it. I was offered, after I did Two Guns, I was offered to do Fast and Furious 7, and that would be surrendering because that was not what I set out to do. But if somebody offers you millions of dollars to do it, and as the head of the studio said to me, you can have any toy in the world. It's a $240 million movie. Please do it now. And you have to say no. That way you don't surrender. You have to use the no. You have to choose the moment, when to take it your way. But you cannot expect, and maybe some can, maybe Bergman could, I don't know, but those times have changed. You cannot walk into Hollywood with a small, weird story and expect them to pay $40 million for it. It's not going to happen. But as you gradually, if you get into a position, you might actually be able to do that,
Yeah, so you weren't just a hired gun then for Two Guns. I mean, how were you convinced that you could make a personal imprint?
Well, I was a hired gun in the sense that, I was hired for the project. I was asked to do it. I was very hesitant in the beginning to do it. But I thought, okay, I'm going to do this one for them. And then I'll make it as much as personal, or put my stamp on it as much as I can. But then I'm heading, and these people who financed that and were behind that are now supporting me in a more ambitious personal project that I'm interested in doing.
And is that plan working out?
Well, I'm shooting it, aren't I? So I might be a total flop, but I'm saying that and that's my process of getting there.
Mm. But then you did pre-Hollywood, I guess you did this interesting experiment in taking Hollywood to Reykjavik when you had Forrest Whitaker in Little Trip to Heaven.
Yeah, and I learned a lot on that. I thought I could make, and I think a lot of Scandinavian filmmakers have done such things and failed, as I did. is basically to make a film in English in your own country, and think you can kind of recreate. You can recreate the set, and you can some way recreate some of the reality of it. But I think most of the time, it just becomes not authentic. And there was a lot. There was a lot of these things going on at the time. I think Thomas Winterberg made a couple of those films. Lars von Trier got away with it because of his, kind of. I don't think they are authentic American films, but people accepted him in his way of doing them. So, but I don't feel like Dance in the Dark is American, at all. It doesn't feel like it happens in America to me. It feels like it happens in a forest in Denmark, or Sweden. Actually, it was. But I'm saying that they are still that interesting, those films, that they kind of survived it. But most of us had to deal with the same, and it's a very dangerous thing. Is this? I say this to a lot of young filmmakers who want to make the films in English. You'd rather do it in your own language and have some audience that and not fall in between the cracks, because there's a lot of English films in English, both from America, England, and all over the world, that don't go anywhere. And the worst thing is that, and that was my only experience of my own audience not being interested, in Iceland, was that film, because it was neither about them nor anyone else. When I made the other films in English, which are more authentic, where they're made, actually Icelandic audience has shown up. So.
But stay away from the mongrel films.
Well, there is this kind of. I understand that there is this. You see guys like Trier succeed in doing that in some way. Those films do not work in America, that well. They still have a big audience in Europe, and I understand the temptation that people have. Like, I want to break. So I come from a country of 300,000 people. Imagine, it's all like showing your film in a Christmas party. It's the audience is so limited. That it's not like I come from France or Spain, where they have millions of people. You have a huge, and they in Spain they have all South America to show their films to. And it's like I actually made the biggest box office success in Iceland since they started counting. There might be some older films that did better, but since they started keeping the numbers together, and it's 90,000 people.
So at least that gives you the satisfaction of saying that 90% of the entire country's population saw your film.
Yes, but it was only 90,000 people. That's the problem, and that cannot sustain. And the same for critics writing about you for the rest of your life is frustrating. So of breaking that barriers, it gave me a lot of freedom, and I think to maybe even do better in Iceland.
Before we leave the Two Guns, I have a clip, and I think we should see it because, we'll talk about it later. Shall we just show the clip on Two Guns? Yeah, the two leads in the film, as you can see, Mark Wahlberg and Denzel Washington, was a kind of an unexpected combo, and their bantering and dialogue was one of the noteworthy things with the film. And I read a review, someone described it as a glorified B-movie where the characters outshoot various bad guys while they're outfoxing each other. Do you agree to that?
Yeah, I think for me, when I was offered this project, and it came a little bit through Mark Wahlberg because I worked with him before.
In Contraband.
In Contraband, and I said, okay, if we can get Denzel to do it with us, it's interesting to me. To see someone who has not been doing comedy and not been smiling, like we don't see him much like that, right? Yeah, right. He's usually a little, and I thought that kind of, okay, that's interesting to me, that there is, and that's an area I like to go into. A lot of the banter here is improvised, and they had fun, and they did, a lot of the things, and I think that's the strongest part of the film. I'm, like Butch Cousin and the Sundance Kid, This Thing, even Out of Sight. I really enjoy when Hollywood does those films well, and that's kind of, nobody's better in doing those films than them. It's like basically you're saying you're watching a movie, let's have fun, and that was kind of my approach, like trying to play with it, not take it too seriously, and have a bit of fun doing it.
And obviously that went down well, because I think this film grossed something like $100 million.
Yeah,
is that the only real way? Okay, more. Shall we make it 120 while we're
a bit more?
Okay, 140?
A little less.
Okay, 30.
So
anyway, is that the only real way to make an impression in Hollywood, in numbers?
Well, I think it's easy to sit in Scandinavia and sometimes be arrogant about that. I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm just saying that it's because, yes, of course, Hollywood is an industry, and they make a lot of great films as well, and some of the best films are made in there. But there is a reality to it, because they don't have government support the way we have in Scandinavia, but they have a huge market. It is a reality. If you don't, you can make movies that don't make much money and are celebrated, and you can keep on working. But if you make big movies and they don't make money, then you won't be working. And there's no way to go home. Like, I can go home and make my Icelandic movies. They can't. They're done, And it's you got to understand. If you don't want to make money with your movies, then don't spend people's money with making them. You can make a story, any story, almost for, $1 million or $2 million like we do, here. But that might not have a commercial appeal in the end of the day, and nobody might see it, or very few. But you can do that. If you want to tell a story that you really want to tell, and you don't want to compromise in any way commercially or have it appealing to audience, then you can do that, and you should. But if even Martin Scorsese can't make, at least he couldn't make films for more than $50 million, and keep the final cut. It just doesn't work like that.
Simple as that. And
no, but for me, it's what is important. I want to say that is that you have to find out if the people who are working with you on those films want to make the same film as you. If that's the case, then there's no trouble. You will find ways through your. I haven't had any issues with cut or with those films I've been working on. But I've heard a lot of stories, and I think that sometimes the filmmaker doesn't really tell what he's going to do. He intends to make maybe a different film, and the producers are trying to get him to make the other film, and then once they're making it, shit hits the fan. It just doesn't work like that. Sometimes also it's the producer using like talents, like coming out of Scandinavia or coming out of those countries, interesting, that can get cast, because they have interesting films to show, and then they plan to do something very different with the film, And that's where a lot of filmmakers who come out of, around the world come there and failed in that situation.
And as I understand it, also Mark Wahlberg played a quite important role in getting this thing together, because you had him in Contraband, the remake of the Icelandic film. So this was a project that the two of you were involved in, getting it in place, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah, well, yes, we did. And he approached me, and then, the studio had made also very well on Contraband. It did really well. It was a cheap movie. It cost $25 million, which is cheap in the terms, and it made around 100 or something. So that that had a lot of good connections there after that. So yes, he's a wonderful man. He's actually, you know, very surprising, you know, because I think a lot of people judge him, you know, he's kind of beefy a little bit and, you know, blokey, but he's actually he's very honorable and decent guy, and he's a hard-working Boston kid that doesn't have a lot of education, but is so street smart that he made it as a singer. He couldn't sing. He made it as a model. He made it as an actor, and he made it as a producer. And now he's doing a lot of business. It's just, and it's interesting to see, you know, and he has 9 brothers and sisters. None of them have been doing that well. So he didn't get anything for free.
Versatile guy. And somewhere in between these Hollywood adventures, you found time to go home to Iceland and shoot a dramatic story called Djupet. It's a dramatic survival story about a fisherman who is in a shipwreck and survives after 6 hours in the North Atlantic and, yeah, a body temperature of 34 or something. So I think, yeah. Do you want to say something? And I have a clip. Yeah, we'll show the clip first.
If they see anything, it's so dark the screen, and this is a dark movie.
Yeah, this is a dark movie, but we'll see how it looks from Djupet. And the boat went away, so he has some tough times ahead of him. But can you tell me something, well, specifically about shooting these scenes and the shipwreck that was prior to this? Because I know it was technically quite complicated.
Because where we ended before, this is a good example of what I was trying to say. I did not want to compromise in any way on this film. I wanted to make it as authentic and real as possible, and therefore I made it at home with a very low budget, you know. And what we ended doing is that we ended shooting it in the ocean because I didn't want to shoot in a tank. First of all, it would be too expensive and then too many visual effects, and then it wouldn't be authentic. 80% of the Icelandic nation lives around the ocean, you know, and they see it every day, angry and black. Not like, you know, some tank in Spain or Malta. And I wanted to achieve that, this grim, really the hardship Icelandic sailors have gone through the ages, and therefore we basically swam with cameras for a month in the ocean, and it was damn cold. And I'm very proud of this movie, and it's very personal. It's a true story from the '84, which I experienced when I was Probably happened when I was 18, and I met the guy in a bar a couple of years later, and he became a kind of national icon for surviving this. He swam for 6 hours, and it's physically impossible. You know, it's humanly impossible to do that, and they haven't figured out yet why he could. You know, and it was like experiencing an Icelandic saga. You know, these old Viking tales, but happening, you know, today. And I bought him, you know, a glass of whiskey and then a full bottle in the end, and we spoke the whole night, and it always stayed with me. And you know, then I just thought this would be the time. You know, this is kind of the other part of me. Like, you know, the further I go out there, the more I need to come back. You know, and that was after having made those, you know, big budget Hollywood movies. I really had to go home and make something, you know, of this. But I don't think I would have, I'm not sure I would have been able to finance this without the other, because even this film sold around the world, you know, almost every country, it hardly made its budget back, you know. And you know, having the other side was very helpful.
And in order to get it right, I mean, you had to dive in there yourself, right?
Yeah, the funny thing that you learn by doing. You know, of course, there's a reason why people shoot in tanks, because you can put a dolly in a tank and have someone swimming and move the camera. If you're actually in the ocean, you can't really do that. So, and if you're going to swim with the camera, we did some swimming with the camera, but you're going to swim with the camera on close-ups, because he has monologues. He's talking to a bird, you know, and that's based on his own story, where he told the bird, and he was talking to it to stay alive. And so I had to shoot him swimming. But at the time I couldn't move the camera, and it would start like way out there in the monologue and end up past the camera. And I couldn't, you know, I needed to be able to move the camera. So I was like, how the hell am I going to do this, you know? So I figured out if I get a rope, tie it around his leg, because we could put the camera on a platform in the ocean, and then I would stay in the ocean myself, and then swim the opposite direction, because the waves are moving the whole time, so you don't really see if he moves or it doesn't. And so I'm actually backstroking most of these scenes with a big monitor on the rig and holding him in the frame, you know, and we were swimming two different directions. And if you have seen a desperate director of getting his actor in frame, then that was that. And the fact, I asked after a day of this, I asked one of the Grapes, could you do that? Because, you know, that kind of, this is the Grapes' job. And they tried, they couldn't. And not because they weren't strong enough, they just weren't desperate enough to get the shot. You know.
I hope you're not practicing the same model when you're doing this Everest film about the climbers who all
Well, I
died.
am actually. I am. I've been shooting in minus 70 to 20 degrees Celsius now. And on the top of a mountain, and I have to have crampons on and the whole thing, and we've been hanging, you know, it's just, yeah, I'm doing that. But the difference of this and that is that if I would shoot the whole thing on Everest, I would probably never be able to finish the movie, and half of the cast would die. So I am doing it in the Dolomites, which are damn cold.
In Italy?
In Italy, you know. So I'm shooting part of it. I shot part of it in Nepal, which was also really cold at this time of the year, and a big part of it shooting in the Dolomites.
Yeah, well, it's a good way in ambition to have the crew alive when the shoot
Yeah,
is finished.
that's you know, for the publicity.
Yeah,
you mean?
well, but I was thinking, staying with this particular film a little bit. I mean, you would think that the film or the story would be over when, you know, when it finally reaches land, miraculously, really. But it's interesting because you devote almost half the film to what happened afterwards.
Yeah, it's probably more like there's one third before the accident and one third during his swim and rescue, and then one third maybe is the aftermath. I thought, because most survival stories and these kind of stories are just, you know, once they come on land, the story is over. For me, it was much more, you know, interesting to see, because he became almost like a clown, you know, like they both made fun. He was hero, and the whole media, which was very naive at the time, and how he affected the country and how it affected him and what he ends up doing, you know, and I thought that for me that was the more interesting part, you know, just from psychological, and I didn't want to make it a soppy at all, or Hollywood. Maybe it's as anti-Hollywood as you can go. Like I saw a movie called The Impossibles, which is kind of the opposite what I was trying to do. There was a lot of crying and a lot of emotional outbursts in that film, and I wanted to make it very like him. Everything is just put one feet in front of the other, and that's how you get through it. And very stoic, and that's what and I think that is my favorite part of the movie, is actually the last part. Though I think maybe it's more exciting and visually the ocean part.
And you shot this particular film at the time when Iceland was really going down as well. I mean, in the financial meltdown. So did that also play into your motivation for making it?
A huge part, yeah.
Yeah,
actually,
how?
there was a reason why I made it at that point, because I had thought about it a long time. Because even in the language, I don't know how you have it in here or in Sweden, but in Iceland we call the economy of the country is named after a boat. It's called Þjóðarskutan. It's the national sailboat. It would be the translation of that. And when it's a difficulty economically in the country, we talk about the national boat going sideways.
So it's a boat name is a metaphor for
it's
the
a
whole
total metaphor
economy.
for economy, because the economy is built up on fishing, and therefore there's a very clear metaphor there. And it wasn't a sideways. Actually, in this case, it was a total shipwreck in the country, and the boat went down, not sideways. And that was one. It was a very clear metaphor on how I felt we had lost our ways, in Iceland. I felt every other friend of mine had a private jet, and we owned every other shop in Scandinavia and London, and I felt we had lost our ways. And then the crash hit, and it became, after that, like chickens without their heads. Everyone running, blaming, And I remember these stories, and there's a volcano, going off, because it really happened when this guy is 10 years old. There was a volcanic explosion in the island. Only time when a village has actually been overrun by lava, and that's part of
the Westman Islands.
Westman Islands, and that is part of the story. And everyone was so stoic. I remember interviews, and I used one of the interviews with an older lady. I said, "Yeah, I can hear there are stones raining on my roof. But we'll be heading to the boats very soon." She was talking to the radio, and there was a fucking volcano hitting her house. And these are qualities that Icelandic people had in the past that I think we have lost a little bit. And I felt this story would be to tell a story of a hero in the times of crisis, because we never tell stories of heroes in Iceland. It's always anti-heroes. And I felt that would be the time. And for me, to do a metaphor instead of what every other filmmaker or theater guy was doing, was telling the story straight out of the headlines, telling a story of the crisis, of a banker who lost everything, blah, blah. I wasn't interested in that at this point. I think we don't have the overview. I think art usually is better served when it has a bigger perspective. And therefore, I chose to use a metaphor instead of a straight story from the time.
So now from the depths of the ocean, you're going as high as you can to the top of Everest. And so is there like a similar metaphor in that kind of story, or would you brand it more as a straight adventure story about?
No, it's a real story. It's a horrifying drama, and
also based on true events.
Based on true events, 96.
Yeah.
If you know the book Into Thin Air. It's the same story. It's not based on the book, but it's about those people, and the metaphor is very clear. It's any success, any ambition people have in life can be married to Everest, and the pointlessness of being successful and taking it far, and then the need of going there, and the need of also being home. And this balance, you can match to anything, very easily to filmmaking. It's very easy for me to understand why these men need to climb Everest, even though it might kill them and they might lose their families. But also when they're up there, the only thing to think about is maybe their family at home, So I think, Everest is kind of iconic idea of success, or getting on the top of it.
John Krakauer is the author's name, right?
Yeah, off Into Thin Air.
But you haven't based it on that particular,
No,
but it's similar.
There have been written about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, I can't remember, books about the same event. It is the biggest reported event. What happened is quite interesting. John Krakauer was a journalist, and he was in the expedition. He was just there for Outside Magazine, supposed to write about commercialization of Everest, which is another part of it, which is interesting to me. Commercializations of nature. And he happened to hit the worst storm ever and the biggest accident, and then he went down and wrote a book and became a famous author and made a lot of money. And it could be very controversial as well, some of the things he said, and there's therefore other books like Anatoly Bukhariev, who wrote The Climb, which is a very famous Russian, Kazakhstani climber, who was probably the best climber on the mountain, who was blamed for certain things in Krakauer's book and wrote another book. There have been endless tales about this story, because there's something very fascinating about people pushing this far, you know. And then there is a story of, which also wrote a book, it's called Beck Weathers, who lost both of his hands and his nose and was left for dead twice on that mountain. And his story is that's the role Josh Brolin is playing. And that's quite an interesting, his story is very interesting.
Well, just imagining the setting and the story, it seems like an extremely complicated venture.
It is a very, you know, we're shooting it in, we were in Nepal and now we're in the Dolomites. We're going to Rome on the Cinecittà, the Fellini studio, and then we end up in 007 States in LA, now in London, in Panwood. So it's a very complicated movie to make. As complicated as it can come, but that's a part of it. I love the challenge, you know.
And as you mentioned earlier, you have a pretty broad scope in terms of what sort of films you do. But would it be fair to describe you as someone interested also in making genre films with a personal imprint on them?
Yeah, I think. Genre or not a genre, I don't really care, you know. I mean, one of my favorite films is The Witness, you know, which is it's a thriller, you know, and I enjoy, as I said, you know, Best Cast in the Sundance Kid. I can enjoy different things, and I don't have to take myself that seriously. I can't play with the medium. But there are sometimes you want to, you know, tell a grueling story with a lot of, you know, intensity, and sometimes, you know, you tell people a nice story about something that's funny that happened to you, or I look at it that way. I can tell different stories, you know, and I enjoy both. I can be, you know, have fun and tell a funny story, and then I can tell something that is really important to me.
As long as the story is good enough to grab your imagination.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter where it comes from.
Yeah, and or the potential of what you can do with the project also.
I read also in some interview that you said that you're against manipulative storytelling in movies, and well, aren't movies all about that? I mean, emotional story or emotional manipulation, really?
No, I don't agree with that. I think.
What would be the difference, would you say, then, between manipulation and, you know, taking you along for the ride?
Giving audience space to make their own mind, not paint people only good or bad, or give them only one road to think. You know, like you put them on a track and they have there's no thinking, there's nothing left for the imagination. And I think that is one of the weaknesses of films. I think today in general is that they're expected to serve you up very, you know, straight up and give you no options. And I think that in theater there is way more openness to that. That's why in some way Checo doesn't really work that well in films, you know, because what
doesn't work?
Checo.
Oh.
You know, yeah, because he's so open, and then nobody's good or bad. People are everything. And in films, if you don't have somebody you can hang your hat on, in general, people will not, you know, come to the film. And I think it's. And then there's emotional manipulation, which you know, which I think, and that's just my taste, you know. Lars von Trier is the master of emotional manipulation, you know, and I particularly, I'm not a big fan of that, you know, and I understand that people can cry and you know, totally lose it over his films, but I can see the manipulation, you know, and I'd rather come to it differently, you know, when I'm watching movies, you know. I don't think Bergman is a manipulator, for example. I don't think he is. He actually is much more intelligent than that he offers more than one perspective.
And speaking about Bergman, may we speak about this?
Yeah,
It's mentioned in on your website as one of many projects that you're onto is a script that Bergman wrote from one of Halldór Laxness's novels, and so you're wanting to go into that territory?
Yeah, this is my favorite book, Independent People. It's about Iceland and you know, the making of a nation, and I've acquired the rights to this. This is the Nobel Prize winning novel by Laxness. And talking about Bergman adapted this book a long time ago. He never made the film. I've been trying to get the script because I want to read it, you know, because I want to understand what he was, you know, going for. I don't think I'm making his script, but it would be very interesting to see it. So that's one of these projects that you know, like, you really want to, you know, make happen, and it would be a big thing for Iceland as well.
That would be interesting to follow. So, well, as we mentioned earlier, one of your films was a remake of a film you produced. It ended up as Contraband. While you're now making a film, or now
I'm just going to say, because there's a great example of Independent People of not emotional manipulation.
Okay.
Because he leaves it totally open. There's a very sensitive moment and scary moment between a father and the stepdaughter. Yeah. And that would be a very challenging, you know, if he did something wrong or not. This is the fine line when the audience has to make up this, or the reader is not given what really happened, not in details, but he's given an indication of something that went wrong.
So you want to keep the
that would be the difference of emotional manipulations. It would be show him rape the kid, or suggest that he might have.
Keep us guessing.
Yeah.
So On the Job is a film already made by a chap called Erik Matti, and about prison inmates in the Philippines, I think, recruited as hired guns to kill. And this is a film that you're remaking?
No, not really. It's a very, it's a very interesting approach. I was approached by a company called XYZ, which is interesting young guys. I actually think they might be. They're not here, are they? Is anyone from there? Because I heard they were in the festival. But anyway, is that you? No. No, sorry. Anyways, I don't want to say anything wrong if they're here. No. That they approached me with a story that happened in Philippines and Mexico that the inmates used to send out of jail in the night with an alibi of being inside to kill people. And this happened in reality in two different places. I was told by them that there was a Filipino movie being based on these events as well. And I got very interested. I thought it was a really interesting story that I wanted to develop and think about. And then I came up with my own pitch. And then I heard about the film coming out in Cannes, and it was in Director's Fortnight. And then the studio, Universal, wanted to buy my story and my pitch, and so we wouldn't have any legal issues. We had to buy the remake rights, but it's very, very different from. Actually, I hadn't seen the film or read the script when I created my own pitch of it. So it's kind of, yeah, it's somewhere in between being a remake or not. I don't know really what to say, but and it's not been written yet. It's just a pitch.
Yeah, an unconscious remake.
Yeah, well,
if you haven't seen the original.
Not yet.
Yeah. So, I mean, you really have a long list of things that you're developing, and you also have created this Reykjavik Studios, which has a television branch, and you're into video games, and so, I mean, you're maybe not all directing all this personally.
No. I'm not into video. I'm not into video games at all.
No.
I'm a retard when it comes to computers, but that's true. I mean, but there is this big company in Iceland that approached me with this project. Like EVE Online was a very famous computer game that they wanted, and I was ready to come on as a producer to try to figure out if you can make that. And we're doing that with Ridley Scott's company, Scott Free. And then I'm producing an Icelandic TV show, which is very ambitious, and we have most of the Scandinavian television stations with us, and with Germany and a couple other places. And that's kind of a murder mystery that happens in a little village in Iceland, in a snowstorm. Everyone is locked in with the killer inside as well. So it's a bit of Agatha Christie there too. and yeah, I'm you know, and we do lots of things. We also made animated short called Hulli. It's like a South Park in Iceland, very dirty. It's quite famous comedian who writes those things. And yeah, I mean, I can go on forever.
Yeah,
but
obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, ideally, you see yourself, you know, in a place where you can keep doing this simultaneously, both, you know, some foreign projects and shooting in Iceland, making films there too.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. You can even make big projects in Iceland. There's nothing that people like you say Hollywood, and everyone says Hollywood, but I'm making a film with an English company in Nepal and Italy. I mean, that's you know, not Hollywood. Yeah, but yes, some of the money might come from there, but there is you don't do it in LA anymore. It's gone. You can do in Sweden or Iceland. We can make those. They don't have to have them anymore, you know. It's just a system of distributing money. And the weird thing about Hollywood, and most of the movie in Hollywood comes from Russia or Germany, you know. So there's like all the money goes there, and then they distribute it around the world to make movies around the world. So it's kind of an old idea, I think, Hollywood. You know, I think you know, you want to make films on a big scale. That's.
Så jag tänker att det kanske någon i publiken, if you want to put a question to Baltasar, now that you have him up here. Anyone? You?
Can you tell me a little bit more about the Viking movie? How far along?
The Viking film, yes.
Yeah.
Well, the Viking film is basically something as I told earlier, I started a long time ago. I'm hoping it will be my next film, and they're already, you know, but I need support from the studio to be able to do that, and there's already some interest, and we are kind of signing it up. I'm hoping that I can start prepping it early next year. Oh, you want to know something else, or like? Well, I can't say it at this time because it's very sensitive, you know. So I don't know who is in here, so. But there is a serious interest in it.
Yeah, you?
As an actor, how do you get a chance to audition for a movie like the Viking movie you're going to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's to approach the casting directors that are working. When I do the Viking movie, I'll definitely have a casting director in the Scandinavian countries that will be, you know, looking for Scandinavian talent, because I plan to do it with English and Scandinavian actors mostly. So that's you know, to figure out how you get yourself on tape for a casting director. That's usually how the process is. And then if you know, like my friends, I usually have one or two I can squeeze into the films, you know. Ingvar, who played the lead in Jazz series in Everest, he's actually playing Anatoly Bukaryev. So.
And you want to sign up? You? Yeah?
Yeah, thank you for a very nice seminar. I was going to ask, for someone producing a film in Iceland, does the geographical isolation itself cause a lot of implications? I mean, maybe logistically or in ways like that. Can you turn to America as well as Europe for
financing?
Not necessarily financing, but I mean, if you need equipment or anything, or people, or...
Well, we have all that in Iceland, actually. We're pretty well, and we have had some... I actually was a part of a company called True North, which I've sold my share in it, but we serviced all these big Hollywood productions that came to Iceland, like Thor and... what was not the Alien, but the Ridley Scott movie, and Noah, now Darren Aronofsky. We did, you know, all these movies. There's been quite a lot of shooting. So they both have been, which is good because the people have been trained through that. And there's a access to a lot of equipment. But we usually ship it in anyway. But what is interesting about countries, Iceland, it's actually easy to make a film there in some way. You know, it's hard to break out with a film from there, but it's easy to make it. Because there is a lot of people and there's a closeness and people help you and you get your film made. But as I say, it's to reach, you know, other countries with it is really hard. And I think there's a lot of local talent. There's a lot of really good people who, you know, you can make top quality film, you know, in the country if you have the skill.
Thank you.
The lady here.
And I'm going to just, sorry, and I think that's kind of general in the Scandinavian countries. It is actually not that hard to get a movie made, especially for first-time director. I think it's way easier than in America and other places.
I was thinking because I guess you just spoke for about an hour, so it seemed like your rise was sort of like, you know, happened overnight. I'm sure it wasn't like that and it was very difficult. But for upcoming directors today, you know, like you said, it's probably quite easy for us now with digital cameras and all that to make films quite easily. But then to progress for some of us who aren't, you know, who are sort of like you and don't want to be put into this box of doing only art house films. We want to actually make a living and, you know, have the possibility of doing good work and, you know, with a bigger budget and getting paid and moving on to that. How do we then move on from this point to?
I would say, and pretty much, I mean, I can only give you my example, is to try to make the best work from home. And I agree with you, because when I was growing up in Iceland also, there was a lot of, you know, either you made arthouse film or you were not a part of it. You know, people looked down on genre films or other. It's changed a lot. I think, you know, you look at even the vampire film that came from Sweden, which nobody really looked at in Scandinavia, but then it broke out in America and is one of the best films of that year. What was called the La Terretta Come In, you know, which is a genre movie, but it kind of is a genre bender a little bit.
And made as a remake.
Yeah, and then, you know, even the films, the Stig Larsson film, when actually no one was making those films 20 years ago. When I made Jar City, which was a police procedure, people, are you going to do that? And it actually became one of my most successful Icelandic films abroad. So, and you can do that with, you know, you can do that with either totally commercially or with an art house, you know, because already doing something in Swedish or Icelandic, it's kind of lends itself to art house anyway. But I believe it's much better to work with that in mind. And I was probably conscious about, I did not want to make a movie that only, you know, my friends and my mother wanted to see. I wanted to make a film that Icelandic people would come to. And I remember the moment when I heard about Jar City, that old people were coming in buses and getting lost in the escalators because they hadn't gone to the cinema, you know, the new cinema ever. They couldn't find it in the escalators. That really made me happy. So I think there is nothing more gratifying. Prices are great reviews are fantastic, but there is nothing more gratifying than seeing a full cinema, and actually after the film is run, you know, not only before, you know, that they stayed there and they enjoyed it.
Just another quick question. Do you usually, or have you ever thought about having a director, a younger director, shadow you when you're working?
Shadow me?
Yes, as in follow you and sort of watch you work on set.
Well, there's always been a lot of, you know, like people like that around me, you know, who are working with me or assisting me or stuff like that. I've never had anyone only shadowing me, but I only had, you know, but people usually say it was a horrible job to be a director's assistant, you know. Like, can you get the coffee? Can you get my laundry done? You know, but at the same time, if people are clever, it's the best place to be. If you want to, you know, if you want to learn, be close to the director, be close to the camera, and because some of the jobs you never really get to hear the conversation. What you get to hear if you are director's assistant, yes, there's a shitty job, but you will probably hear all the conversations that happen behind the curtain, how the films are really made to happen. Not how they're made only, but also how you can get them made, you know, because a lot of these conversations happen, you know, behind closed doors. The negotiations, they're figuring out, you know, all kinds of things that you wouldn't think of in Scandinavia, especially, that you have to deal with when you go to Hollywood, like bond companies and all kinds of stuff that we've never heard about. I mean, people didn't even know about sales companies in Iceland when I was starting. Nobody really knew how you sell your films.
Well, Baltasar, thank you so much for sharing these experiences with us, and thank you, the audience, for coming.
Thanks for staying.
And congratulations on your award, the first recipient.